No. 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 Oh, I was having a nightmare.
Was it about that book you're reading?
No, actually, it was about turning this book into a TV movie.
I have some bad news for you.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. I'm Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and downright notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below, and it'll give you a download on what the Horror Movie Syllabus is all about. But in short, we're going to look at a particular subgenre of horror and then examine 3 movies from that subgenre. Today, the subgenre we're looking at are Stephen King movies. And this is kind of an interesting subgenre for me because Stephen King movies litter the entire syllabus. There are so many of them on the syllabus in different subgenres because, frankly, he does different subgenres of horror. And so begs the question, do we really need a Stephen King subgenre? And I'm going to say yes, obviously, because I put one in the syllabus. And I did it primarily for 2 reasons. One is, confession time. It's kind of one of those outlet subgenres that I like to use where I can do a catch-all. I can put Stephen King movies that I couldn't fit into other subgenres here, rather than lose a spot in another subgenre. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. But the other reason why is because there really isn't another writer as prolific as Stephen King, with as many adaptations of their work as Stephen King. It was noteworthy enough that I felt like he deserved his own subgenre. And I'll admit that I also, I play a little bit of favoritism when I made the syllabus. It's my syllabus, and it reflects a lot of the things that I care about. And I tried to be a little bit more balanced. I did a musical subgenre, for example, and I don't care about musicals, but I do like Stephen King. Now, I have a weird relationship with Stephen King. We're not dating or anything like that. I mean that we he writes books that I really like, and he writes books that really disappoint me. Like he's all over the map. And like we can be honest, if you're a King fan, your protagonist is going to be a writer from New England, probably Maine, who's going to be your hero. There's going to be a certain amount of formula. If there are bad people in there, they're probably 1950 style greasers, and he has trouble sticking his landings. And that's where it really breaks down for me. Is a lot of his books will be great until I get to the ending, and then they kind of fall apart at the end, and it's frustrating. And unfortunately, a lot of the movies based on those books follow suit. And so King can be a challenge for me. It can be a hit and miss for me, hot and cold. And I think it's that way for a lot of people as well. I know there's a lot of King devotees who who really love him and love his work. But I think even they would admit that, yeah, there are clunkers, there are things that are subpar, there are some tropes, there are some interesting things about it that even they would be willing to admit. It doesn't make him bad. First of all, the highs are very high. Stephen King's best works are still amazing, and some of the best movies on his work are also amazing. And sometimes the movies that aren't good or the books that aren't good still fun. And we're going to talk about some of that today. So this is by no means meant to disparage Stephen King. I'm just keeping it real. I'm Professor Victor, and I tell you my honest opinion on things. King is hit and miss with me. Sometimes he's bad. Sometimes he's great. Most of the time, he's somewhere in the middle, and you usually know what you're going to get. And I'd say while the endings can let you down, overall you're generally left satisfied. You don't feel like you wasted your time. But I digress. Your opinion may vary, mileage may vary on this one, but I do think that it's definitely worth talking about. It's definitely worth having a discussion about. And that's why we're here today with the Stephen King subgenre. We're going to talk about a few of his movies that didn't fit somewhere else on the syllabus, but that I felt I wanted to talk about. And in most cases, I actually really, really, really like. So with that, let's start getting into the movies. We're going to organize them as undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate level. And in this case, we're going to go with how well known or how famous they are. How they're going to go an increasing level of notoriety. With that, let's go ahead and dig into Stephen King. The first Stephen King adaptation we're talking about today, the undergraduate level selection, is 1408. 1408 came out in 2007 and has never been a huge hit. It's not a legendary movie like some of the other movies we'll talk about and other King movies that we have talked about, but it does have its fans. People who like it seem to really, really like it, and I count myself as one of those people. If you're not familiar with it, 1408 stars John Cusack as a guy who investigates haunted houses or haunted buildings for as a writer. Again, as a writer, and he gets an invitation to investigate room 1408 in a hotel that is supposedly haunted. He can't resist the urge to explore this, even though there's some signs that say maybe he shouldn't do that. Maybe this is not going to end well, and we're going to leave it there because I don't want to spoil this movie for you, and this movie is very, very good. This is a movie that seems to have gotten slept on a bit. I don't know why. I think it was a modest enough hit. I don't think it was critically panned. I don't think people disliked it. But for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to have endured the way you would expect it to endure if you had seen it. And I'm not sure why that is, because everything about it is pretty good. It's a well-made movie. And in particular, it's got John Cusack's excellent performance at the center of it, which is key because the vast majority of this movie takes place in one room, room 1408. And it's mostly John Cusack by himself. Now, this can be a recipe for disaster with the wrong actor. But John Cusack is not the wrong actor. In fact, I'd argue John Cusack's never the wrong actor, but that's a whole other story. John Cusack brings his A game here. He draws you in and he keeps you compelled the entire time. He puts this movie squarely on his shoulders and he carries it, and it works really, really well. John Cusack's doing the heavy lifting. That said, the effects in the movie are solid. The storytelling and pacing is really good. This is a Stephen King short story fleshed out to a full feature-length story. That oftentimes is also a recipe for disaster, but here works out really well. They've fleshed it out quite well, given Cusack's character enough character background and character depth to make you care about him to sustain the running time. And the movie is again well paced. It doesn't drag. It doesn't feel bloated. It doesn't feel like it's padded out, even though technically I guess it is. It's tight. It works rather well. It's also got Samuel L. Jackson in there doing his thing, given just enough dash of Sam to give the movie a little bit of spice, a little bit of flavor. But it really is Cusack's show. He really is the one holding this together, and he's great in it. I really like the movie. I like the mystery around it. I like the scares. I think it's very, very effective. Again, I don't want to go too much into detail because I don't want to spoil it, but I really think it's a compelling movie. It really is engaging, surprising. It came out of nowhere to me. I wasn't familiar with the short story, and I really, really liked this movie when it came out. I still really, really like this movie. I should note that it does have multiple endings, which are available on various media. And I won't go into the differences of them or anything like that because, again, I don't want to spoil the movie for you, and it would definitely spoil it by telling you the different endings. Suffice to say that I think it's the director's cut that has the best ending. That's the general consensus is that the best ending is the director's cut ending, and I think I would subscribe to that theory or that opinion. That if you get an opportunity, check out the director's cut ending. That's probably the best one to go for. And if you really like the movie, maybe explore the other ones too. I think there's probably YouTube videos that talk about it. It's probably the easiest way to do it. But 1408 is an underrated movie for sure. The people who've seen it are passionate about it for a reason. It's because it's really good. It's really entertaining. It's a nice little spooky story that knows what it's trying to do and does it really, really well. It delivers the goods, and people slept on it. So if you're one of those people, you owe it to yourself to go and check it out. It's definitely one that will hold your attention. It's a good time. It will deliver what you're expecting it to deliver. And if you have seen 1408, I'm guessing you're one of those people that are passionate about it. So let us know in the comments why you love it without spoiling for people. And convince people who haven't seen it to check it out, because I think it's one that needs to be seen a lot more widespread than it has been so far. So I'd like to see 1408 getting a little bit more love. The next Stephen King adaptation that we're looking at today is the graduate level selection, The Mist. The Mist came out in 2007, the same year that 1408 did, but they are very, very different movies. They may both be King stories, but this one is a lot more bleak and challenging of a film, but we'll get into that in just a second. If you're not familiar with it, The Mist tells a story of a group of people that are trapped in a supermarket when a mysterious mist rolls into town, and and the mist holds a bunch of scary creatures that are attacking people if they go into the mist. So the people feel compelled to stay in the supermarket, and they don't always agree on how they should react or deal with this threat. And that leads to infighting and ultimately to some hijinks abounding, as we like to say. And I won't get too much more into it than that because I do not want to spoil the movie. But The Mist is a movie that works really well with the paranoia slash isolation thing. That whole people trapped together, it's starting to turn on each other aspect, that aspect of horror that I tend to love so much is on full display here to good effect. It's got an ensemble cast, but it's mostly led by Thomas Jane, who looks exactly like Aaron Eckhart, so it might actually be Aaron Eckhart for all I know. But he's kind of your main character. But there's a lot of character actors in here, and they're all doing really good work. And it's key because that's where the heart of the story lies, is in these interactions between these people trapped in the supermarket and how they break off into different factions that are against each other. In particular, the religious faction that starts viewing this as, some sort of a religious event happening, and the fanaticism that gets tied into it. It's really chilling stuff, and it's really, really well done. I really like that part of the movie. I really like that interaction, especially the religious underlyings. As you know, I tend to like religion movies, so that part really works for me. Where the movie gets to be a little bit disappointing, not unlike a King novel sometimes, is in the special effects, primarily the creature effects. They did a lot of CGI here, and it's dodgy CGI at best, even in 2007. It wasn't very good then. It's really not very good now. And it's disappointing because this movie draws you in. It really grabs you and keeps you locked in with this pot boiler of people stuck together and turning on each other. But when you see the creatures, too many times they just look fake and kind of silly, and it takes me out of the story. It takes me out of it, and I just wish they had done a little bit more practical work, or maybe just kind of hid the creatures a little bit better. Because when you can't see them, they're terrifying. Because your imagination's like, what the hell's out there? It's really creepy. It's really scary, really creepy. But when you see them and they look kind of animated, kind of cartoony, it just takes you out for a second, and it loses that tension. It loses the audience a little bit. And that's a shame because otherwise this movie is top notch. This movie's really, really good. And it's just those effects. Those effects really ding the movie quite a bit. The movie was directed by Frank Darabont, and if that name's familiar to you, it should be because he's done a few other King movies, some of the best King adaptations, including Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile. So he understands King, and he knows how to tell a King story really, really well. Again, this is another short story like Shawshank Redemption that Darabont has fleshed out into a full length feature, and he's done a really good job of it. Again, the only knock on it I really have is the CGI. The directing is good, the acting is good, the story is good, the premise, everything, it all works. It's just that CGI that really is, it's an unfortunate thing. I kind of wish they could remaster it or something because it's really a bummer. Darabont did do one other thing that was kind of controversial, but actually winds up working out rather well, at least in my opinion, and that is he changed the ending of the story. The ending in the story is one thing, and again, I'm not going to spoil any of it for you, but the ending in the movie is something far, far more. It's, like I said, it's a somewhat bleak movie, but it is an incredibly dark, bleak ending. Um, and it's not, it's a controversial ending. Some people really don't love it. Other people love it. I'm one of the people who love it. I think it took a lot of guts to do this ending, and really, really, it's a gut punch of an ending. And I feel like I can understand why a lot of people are left unsatisfied as well. It's heartbreaking and it's tough. Even Stephen King said that he thought Darabont's ending was better than his, which I thought was a magnanimous and a very selfless thing to admit. And he's right. It is better. The ending is what makes the movie go from being good to being great. It's one of the most famous things about the movie, but again, I'm not going to spoil it for you. Hopefully, you don't already know. If you don't, try to see it before you find out what the ending is about because it's so great. It takes a really good movie with a really great premise and just leaves it on such a memorable, chilling note that it kind of makes the movie kind of legendary almost. Not like a bona fide classic necessarily, but something that is definitely notorious, definitely memorable, will stick with you. If you have not seen The Mist, I would definitely say check it out. Be aware of the CGI, try to give it a pass, but try to let yourself get engaged in the story because it's really, really good. And let me know what you think after you've seen it, again, without spoiling it for people. If you have seen a movie, also let me know what you think. Don't spoil it for you, people, because while that ending is kind of infamous now, people still don't know what it is. Let them find out on their own. But The Mist, it's a great ride, a really well made movie, really worth your time. So check it out and then come back and let us know what you thought of it. And our third Stephen King adaptation to talk about today, the postgraduate level selection, is Carrie. Carrie came out in 1976 and is directed by Brian De Palma and is a bona fide horror classic. It is one of the best King adaptations ever and a really great horror film, one of the greatest horror films ever. So let's get into it. If you haven't seen Carrie, the movie is about a high school girl played by Sissy Spacek who is an outsider, kind of an outcast, and has a very overbearing religious mother who shelters her and really abuses her, frankly. So she's bullied at school, she's bullied at home, and she has telekinetic powers that are burgeoning, blossoming, and might allow her to get revenge on everybody. We won't get into how that happens because I don't want to spoil it for you in the event that you haven't seen it. But Carrie is incredible. Carrie is a fantastic movie. It really is a bona fide classic. It is one of those movies that every horror film fan should see. It's again directed by Brian De Palma, who is an excellent director. Even if he is, a Hitchcock acolyte, he suffers from Hitchcock envy. I frankly don't think that's a bad thing. I like De Palma's work. I think he's really good at developing tension and suspense. And I think he's in fine form on Carrie. He's doing a great job of keeping this paced well, keeping us engaged, making us love our main character, making us really despise her oppressors, and then paying it off in spectacular fashion. Sissy Spacek is absolutely phenomenal as the bullied girl Carrie. She is an odd looking girl. She's just kind of a strange, odd duck looking girl. And you can understand people would be bullying her. You can see it. You can understand where it's coming from. And then when you see her mother, played by Piper Laurie, the religious zealot that she is, and the really awful things that she's instilling in Carrie and kind of putting on her, and the way she abuses her both emotionally and physically is really heartbreaking and shocking and infuriating, frankly. This is all important because you need to identify with Carrie. You need to root for her because when everything turns, when her telekinetic powers really fully show up in force, you need to be on her side in order for this movie not to go off the rails. And De Palma pulls it off. Spacek pulls it off. You're with Carrie 100%. And when you see the shocking prom scene, which I won't spoil here, but it is one of the most iconic images in horror. It hits so hard. Out of context, it's a pretty powerful image. In context, it's absolutely devastating. And everything that follows from that, you're on board. Kind of like John Wick with the dog. You're right there with him. It really does hit. It really works extremely well. A big part of this is an amazing cast. Not only Sissy Spacek and Piper Laurie, who are both incredible in the movie. You've got John Travolta, you've got Amy Irving, you've got Nancy Allen, you've got PJ Souls. Everybody's doing a great job. Everybody is really selling their role, and you're just fully immersed in Carrie's world. You're right there with her. You're right there in there. You believe it. It's a good adaptation of King's novel. It's one that I think does it justice, serves it well, and it's one that has endured as a classic for a reason. It's all these ingredients coming together to make an excellent experience. It's a great story with great source material, a director who's doing some of his best work, a cast that is all bringing their A game, all knowing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and just an experience that's put together in a way that is going to be an emotional, moving, and wonderfully entertaining experience, with an ending that is cliche now, but pretty noteworthy and groundbreaking at the time. No pun intended. If you've seen it, the movie was a mad hit and it's endured. And it has had a bit of a franchise. It has a sequel, and it has a couple of reboots or remakes. And I'll be honest with you, I like all of them. They're not all particularly good, but I like them all because I like Carrie. I like the character. The Rage Carrie 2 is it's not great, but it's fun. I think on its own, it's not a bad movie. As a sequel, it's far inferior, but it's fun. And I think that the most recent remake of Carrie, starring Chloe Grace Moretz and Julianne Moore, has a couple of really great actors at the core of it. The movie is not really doing a lot more different, but those actors are kind of carrying it along, so I don't think it's a bad thing. Unfortunately, Chloe Grace Moretz doesn't have the same awkwardness that Sissy Spacek does, so it's hard to buy into her as the bullied teen because she seems a little too pretty and cool to really be that. So it's a little harder sell than Sissy Spacek, but it's not a bad movie. And the Angela Bettis one, Angela Bettis, not as good as Sissy Spacek just because Sissy Spacek's performance is iconic, but Angela Bettis is fantastic as Carrie in the TV version of it that was done, I think, in the 90s or early 2000s. Anyways, I do like all of those versions. I do. They're not all particularly good, but the original is. The original is amazing. It's a fantastic movie. If you haven't seen it, you absolutely have to see it. And for those of you who have seen it, which is most of you probably, frankly, I'm assuming you guys like it too. I don't think I've ever met somebody who dislikes the movie Carrie, and if you do, let us know why. But I don't know why you would. Like I said, I think all the ingredients are there. Everything is great. It's a souffle that rose. It's a movie that really came out pretty much perfect. I don't think I would change anything. Yeah, it's a little dated by today's standard, but I think that just lends itself to charm. I think it's a great movie and it's a must see for your horror education. So if you haven't seen Carrie, go check it out post haste. So those are our three picks for the Stephen King subgenre. But if you like Stephen King and you want a few extra credit movies, I've got the remedy. The first extra credit movie I'm going to mention is a movie called The Dead Zone. And The Dead Zone is one of my favorite King adaptations, actually. I really love this movie. Came out in the mid 80s, and I didn't fully appreciate it as a kid, but I liked it. And then as I got older, I really wound up liking it. If you haven't seen it, the movie stars Christopher Walken as a man who falls into a coma in an accident and wakes up years later with psychic abilities. He can touch people and get glimpses of the future, of their future when he touches them. And he uses that power for good. And then when he touches an aspiring politician and sees a horrific vision of the future, he is tasked with an impossible decision of what to do about that. And I'll leave it there because I don't want to spoil the movie, because suffice to say, the movie is a really fun ride. It's directed by David Cronenberg, but it's surprising that it's directed by David Cronenberg because he is not Cronenberging it up a little as much here. He's not really doing his body horror thing here, that's not a bad thing. The movie doesn't call for it, and he's doing exceptional work here. This movie is really well made. The way that the visions are played out work extremely well. He gets great performances out of his actors, most notably Christopher Walken as the lead character, Johnny, who is the psychic. Walken's a character in and of himself, right? This is young Walken, so those of you who are younger who are familiar with Christopher Walken in the Walken caricature, the caricature who talks like that. I can't do a Christopher Walken impression. I'm not going to do it, but you know what I'm talking about. Everybody does the Christopher Walken impression. It's not that it's not here, but younger Christopher Walken, you don't see it so pronounced. He's not as much of a caricature, and he's really good here. And you will connect with him. You will feel for him, and feel for his plight. There's a lot of pathos in this movie that works really, really well. And the plot line involving Martin Sheen and everything like that as the politician, who's also great in the movie, is fascinating. It works out really, really well. It's again another good adaptation of a King work that I think is quite good, and it delivers. It gives me what I want, and I really, really like this movie. It pained me a little bit to not put it on the syllabus, frankly, because I think it's an underrated movie that doesn't get as much love. It did have a TV series where Anthony Michael Hall played the lead character Johnny, and it went on for like I think 5 or 6 seasons. I actually really liked that. They took the premise of it and stretched it out a little bit, which felt like it wasn't going to work very well. But they had enough going on in his kind of mission to help people with his powers, and of course the pathos with his ex that he has lost because she moved on 5 years later with him being in a coma. That played up really well for some TV drama. So if you like the story of the Dead Zone and if you like the movie, I would also recommend the TV show. It's actually rather good. underrated show that didn't get as much love as I think it could have gotten, but I do really like that one a lot. But definitely check out the movie if you're a King fan, or if you just like kind of dystopian type stories or psychic stuff and things like that. This movie is gonna hit for you. I think this movie is underrated. I really like it, and I definitely think you should check it out. The next extra credit King adaptation I'm going to mention is Apt Pupil. And Apt Pupil came out in the late 90s and is a complicated and somewhat difficult movie to watch and even to talk about, frankly, without being too insensitive or something like that, because it's some complicated stuff going on in this movie. If you're not familiar with it, Apt Pupil is the story about a young boy who discovers that his next door neighbor is a Nazi war criminal who is hiding out. But rather than turn him into the police, this boy who has his own problems and issues decides to blackmail the Nazi neighbor into regaling to him stories about the Holocaust and kind of teaching him weird things. Um, and it's about as unsettling and disturbing as it sounds, quite frankly. But I won't go into it too much more than that, so as to not spoil it. If you want to check it out, suffice to say, given that description, you can see why App Pupil is a little bit of a tough one because it's a pulpy horror movie that's dealing with some really heavy stuff. And then on top of it, it's directed by Bryan Singer, who has his own share of controversies. And if you're not familiar with it, go ahead and look it up. I don't want to get into it too much. We've talked about people like Victor Silva before and stuff like that. And Bryan Singer maybe not quite as bad as that, but Bryan Singer's pretty bad, and there's a reason why his career is really taken a nosedive, considering that he's an excellent director, and he's doing good work here. But it complicates things, especially when you know about the subject matter of it and some of the scenes in this movie. Knowing Bryan Singer's troubled problems in his history, kind of recontextualizes some of the scenes in this movie. But it's a challenging movie, but I do think it's a good movie. The premise is really creepy and unsettling, and it really reflects like how people are monsters, and how it can be innate and kind of ingrained even in children. And it's really kind of a nihilistic and dark and depressing look at people, and so that's why I say it's kind of a hard watch. It's got Sir Ian McKellen playing the neighbor, and he is, he's always great. He's fantastic, and he is deeply disturbing in this movie. It's Here's the thing: we all love Ian McKellen. Right? He's lovable, right? He's like a member of the family. He's like your great uncle or something. But in this movie, I mean, he's a Nazi, and it's really uncomfortable. See him in full SS regalia. It's really uncomfortable and very effective as a result. And Brad Renfro, rest in peace, Brad Renfro, gone too soon, playing the young boy who's manipulating him. Brad Renfro gives a great performance, and you can see the flashes of why he was a star on the rise and why people were high on him. And his career, unfortunately, took a side turn, and he had a lot of personal issues to deal with too, and eventually passed away. And it's unfortunate. The talent was there, and it's on display in this movie. The two of them together, fantastic. And I think it's a big part of what makes the movie work so well. Is not only do you have this really unsettling premise, but you have two actors doing a really good job carrying it. It's a tough watch, though. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to undersell it. It's a tough watch, and I'm not really sure you'll be rewarded for that watch. Frankly, I've never read the King story that it's based on, but I would like to. I would like to see how good of an adaptation this one is. But the movie itself, I think it's just it's a really powerful movie, and I think that's why I like it so much. It's a powerful movie that hits for me with great performances, and it's kind of a little seen movie. Not a lot of people talking about this one. I think probably for good reason. But if you think it's up your alley, or if you think you have the constitution for it, I'd definitely recommend App Pupil. I think it's a well-made movie with really good performances about a really interesting and kind of bone-chilling subject matter that's gonna maybe leave you feeling a little icky inside, but really compelling. So yeah, that's App Pupil for you. And the last extra credit movie that I'm going to mention today is Sleepwalkers. Sleepwalkers came out in the early 90s, and it's an awful movie. For a number of reasons, it's an awful movie. And basically, if you're not familiar with it, it's a story about people who can shapeshift into giant cat-like creatures, and how they are trying to survive in this small town, and there's a kind of a love story involved, and then there's some other sex stuff involved, and it's a mess of a movie, and I can't really go into it too much without spoiling major things. Not sure you care if I spoil it, but I don't want to spoil it anyway because I don't do that. Um, Suffice to say, Sleepwalkers is a mess for a number of reasons. The biggest one for me is the terrible CGI. It's really, really awful. I mean, it makes the mist CGI look good. It's really bad. The CGI morphing effects was a pretty new technology in 1992 when this movie came out, um, and and it shows. Even at the time, it wasn't particularly good. It's really, really bad now. You really wish they had done something more practical, like a werewolf transformation, like The Howling or something like that. Because I think that would have made this movie work a lot better, and at least would have had some really cool effects. But the CGI effects aren't good, but they really think they are, and they're really pushing them, and it's unfortunate. Like as a time capsule piece of like early CGI technology and its progression, it's a fascinating thing to watch, but it's laughably bad. It's not good. It's not good, and unfortunately, the story kind of follows suit. It's kind of all over the place. It doesn't make a tremendous amount of sense, and it's got some really awkward stuff that I'm reluctant to even tell you about it because I guess it's kind of a spoiler, but I guess I should just say spoiler alert for like incestual type stuff. That doesn't make any damn sense whatsoever. This movie is it's terrible. It's terrible. Why am I even talking about it? Well, honestly, longtime subscriber and commenter Jazzy Wolf kind of talked me into it. Jazzy Wolf brought up Sleepwalkers a while back, and I was like, I'm going to revisit that. And here's the thing, it is bad. It's bad, but it's kind of fun. Like, is it so bad it's good? Maybe, maybe. I'm still on the fence about it. I would have said no before, but after Jazzy talked me into rewatching it, I'm inclined to maybe go ahead and say yes now. But I'm not confident in that yet. But suffice to say, I had a good time with it. The first time I saw it, it was a horrible experience. I saw it in the theaters, and I think my expectations were very different. Stephen King at the height of his popularity right then, and so I had high expectations, and it's got the Sleepwalker song and everything like that, and it looked like it was gonna be kind of cool. It was not, and I was madly disappointed. Like I talked about earlier in the video, being disappointed with the ending of Stephen King books. This was a Stephen King movie that I was sorely disappointed in. I got very resentful about it. I was actually kind of angry about it. Enough time has passed. And so now I'm not angry about it, and I kind of knew what to expect. And so now I kind of find it hilarious. Like, these are decisions being made in this movie, and I just cannot for the life of me explain why these decisions are being made. Like, they're colossally bad decisions. Like, this movie doesn't really make sense, and that's kind of a good thing. Like, if you can kind of turn off your brain, or even just like turn your brain on and just kind of like puzzle out why would you do this stuff? This movie might be a fun ride for you. So Jazzy, thanks for making me give it a second chance on this. Um, Again, not a good movie. Go in expecting it to be a bad movie. Maybe get some friends over, crack open some drinks. Order a pizza, make it a party. Maybe you have a good time with this one. And that's kind of the thing. I like bad movies, so why should I grouse about Sleepwalkers? It's a bad movie. It's a bad movie, but it's kind of a fun watch because it's a bad movie. So I'm turning my opinion around on this one, and you've seen me do that in the past. I admit when I've changed my mind, when I've grown on something, and I don't think I've grown, like an appreciation for it. Like, oh, it's actually much better than I thought it was. No, it's actually probably worse than I thought it was, but I can appreciate the fun of that, and acknowledge that what, hey man, they were trying. So Sleepwalkers, I now have an affection for it that I didn't have before. Thanks to you, Jazzy Wolf. And if you do watch it and it's just an awful experience, Jazzy Wolf is to blame, and they're in the comments. So you leave that comment for Jazzy Wolf at that point. But hopefully you don't. Hopefully you guys have a good time. If you haven't seen Sleepwalkers and you check it out, hopefully you have a fun time with it. You've been warned. So at your own risk, guys, at your own risk. So that's going to do it for our Stephen King exploration. Thanks for hanging out with me and talking about these movies. Like as I said, there are Stephen King movies littered throughout the syllabus. We've talked about several already. We'll be talking about other ones in the future. But if you have Stephen King movies that you think should have been talked about, leave them in the comments. We'll talk about them. If I'm going to talk about them later, I'll let you know. But bring them up because if somebody's new to Stephen King, which seems kind of like a weird thing, but there are people who are new to Stephen King, give them recommendations. Tell them what the best ones are. Even some of the non-horror ones, things like Stand By Me and Shawshank Redemption. You can bring them up. I guess I just did, but King has a lot of good stuff out there. There's a lot of bad stuff out there. Looking at you, Dreamcatcher. Wow, that movie's borderline offensive. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. Mention King movies that you think are good in the comments below, so that people who haven't seen them can maybe check them out, and we'll continue the discussion there. But for now, I hope that you get a chance to read a good Stephen King book, and maybe watch a good Stephen King movie and enjoy yourself until I can talk to you next week. But for this week, we'll just say class dismissed.